The morning sun cast long shadows across Bugram Airfield as Captain Sarah Mitchell performed her pre-flight inspection on her F-16C Fighting Falcon. The aircraft gleamed in the Afghan sunlight, its gray camouflage paint reflecting the harsh reality of combat operations in one of the world's most challenging theaters. Sarah ran her hands along the smooth surfaces, checking for any signs of damage or wear that might compromise the mission ahead. At 28 years old, Sarah had already logged over 800 combat hours in various theaters, but Afghanistan always presented unique challenges. The mountainous terrain, unpredictable weather patterns, and ever-present threat of enemy fire made every sortie a test of skill and nerves. Today's mission briefing had been routine on paper, but Sarah knew that in Afghanistan, routine missions had a way of becoming anything but ordinary. Her squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, approached with the final mission updates. A tall, weathered man with silver streaks in his dark hair, Harrison had been flying combat missions for over 15 years. His experience showed in the way he carried himself and the calm authority in his voice as he spoke to his pilots. "Mitchell, weather looks good for the next 6 hours. You'll be leading Viper flight with Reynolds, Chun, and Rodriguez as your wingmen. Intelligence reports minimal surface-to-air threat in your assigned sector, but keep your eyes open. The Taliban have been moving equipment through the valleys lately." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility that came with leading a four-ship formation. Captain Mike Reynolds, her usual number 2, was a steady pilot from Texas with an easy smile and nerves of steel. Captain Lisa Chun brought technical precision to everything she did, her background in aerospace engineering making her invaluable for complex missions. Captain Carlos Rodriguez, the youngest of the group at 25, had already proven himself in several combat situations with his quick reflexes and sharp tactical mind. The briefing room buzzed with the controlled energy that preceded every combat mission. Maps covered the walls, showing the complex terrain of eastern Afghanistan where they would be operating. The area was a patchwork of valleys, ridges, and small villages where friendly forces were conducting operations against insurgent networks that had been disrupting supply lines and threatening civilian populations. Intelligence Officer Major Patricia Williams stood at the front of the room, pointing to specific locations on the digital map display. "Your primary mission is to provide close air support for Army units conducting clearing operations in the Karengal Valley. Ground forces expect light resistance, but they want fast movers overhead as a deterrent and ready to respond if the situation escalates." The Karengal Valley had earned a reputation as one of the most dangerous areas in Afghanistan. Its steep walls and dense forest provided perfect cover for insurgent forces, while the narrow passages made it difficult for ground units to maneuver. Sarah had flown missions over the valley before and knew how quickly situations could deteriorate in that unforgiving terrain. Weather forecast shows clear skies with winds from the northwest at 15 knots. Visibility unlimited below 20,000 feet, with some high cirrus clouds that shouldn't affect operations. Temperature at altitude will be -20 Celsius, surface temperature 42 Celsius. Be aware of density-altitude effects on aircraft performance, especially during any low-level maneuvering. Sarah made notes on her knee board, calculating fuel consumption and time on station. With external fuel tanks, her F-16 could maintain station over the target area for approximately 2 hours, providing sustained support to ground forces. The aircraft was loaded with a mixed ordnance package suitable for various targets: 2 500-pound GPS-guided bombs for smaller precision munitions and 500 rounds of 20mm ammunition for the internal cannon. Captain Reynolds leaned over to Sarah during a brief pause in the briefing. "Heard the ground boys are expecting to find some interesting caves in those ridges. Intel thinks there might be weapons storage facilities hidden up there." Sarah nodded. Cave complexes were common in the region, providing insurgent forces with protected storage areas and defensive positions that were extremely difficult to assault. Air support was often crucial in such operations, providing precision strikes that could seal cave entrances or eliminate threats that ground forces couldn't safely approach. The communications plan was straightforward but critical. Ground forces would be operating on one frequency, with the forward air controller managing air support requests on another. Sarah's flight would monitor both channels while maintaining contact with airborne command and control aircraft that coordinated all air operations in the region. Time hack in 10 seconds, Major Williams announced. 3, 2, 1 hack. All 4 pilots synchronized their watches, ensuring precise coordination throughout the mission. Timing would be crucial, especially if events on the ground required immediate air support. As the briefing concluded, Sarah gathered her flight for a final discussion of formation procedures and emergency protocols. Flying in mountainous terrain required constant vigilance and precise communication between aircraft. The thin air at high altitude affected aircraft performance, while the terrain created unpredictable wind patterns that could separate aircraft or push them into dangerous areas. Standard fighting wing formation until we reach the target area, Sarah instructed. Chun and Rodriguez maintain visual contact at all times. If we need to go tactical, remember that these valleys can mask radio communications. If you lose contact, follow brief lost communication procedures and rejoin at the alternate frequency. The 4 pilots walked across the flight line to their aircraft, their flight suits laden with survival gear appropriate for the harsh Afghan environment. Each carried a pistol, survival radio, first aid kit, and emergency supplies that could sustain them for several days if they were forced to eject over hostile territory. The weight of responsibility was evident in their focused expressions as they approached their aircraft. Ground crew chiefs were already waiting at each aircraft, having completed their own pre-flight inspections and prepared the jets for combat operations. Technical Sergeant Maria Santos, Sarah's crew chief, had been maintaining F-16s for 12 years and took personal pride in the condition of every aircraft under her care. "Aircraft's clean, ma'am," Santos reported crisply. "Fuel tanks topped off, all systems checked, and operational. Ordnance loaded and armed as briefed. She's ready to bring you home safely." Sarah appreciated the professionalism and dedication of the ground crew. These men and women worked around the clock in difficult conditions to ensure that aircraft were mission-ready. Their efforts often went unrecognized, but pilots knew that their lives depended on the quality of maintenance performed by these skilled technicians. The F-16 single Pratt and Whitney engine spooled up with its characteristic whine as Sarah completed her engine start procedures. Gauges and displays came alive across the cockpit as sophisticated electronic systems conducted their built-in tests. The heads-up display projected critical flight information onto the windscreen, while multifunction displays showed navigation information, threats, and weapon status. Tower communications crackled through her headset as Bagram's air traffic controllers managed the complex flow of aircraft departing for various missions throughout the region. Military transports, helicopters, and fighter aircraft all shared the busy airspace around the base, requiring precise coordination to ensure safe separation. Viper flight, Bagram Tower, taxi to runway 21 right, contact departure on 347.25. Sarah acknowledged the clearance and began taxiing her aircraft toward the active runway. The other 3 F-16s fell into formation behind her, their pilots completing final systems checks as they moved into position for takeoff. The runway stretched ahead, shimmering in the heat rising from the concrete surface. Sarah advanced the throttle and felt the familiar surge of acceleration as her aircraft gathered speed. The F-16 lifted off smoothly, its landing gear retracting as she established a climbing turn to the east. One by one, her wingmen joined the formation as they climbed toward their assigned altitude. Afghanistan's rugged landscape spread out below them as they flew toward the target area. Snow-capped peaks rose above 20,000 feet, while deep valleys carved intricate patterns through the mountainous terrain. From altitude, the country appeared deceptively peaceful, but Sarah knew that reality on the ground was far different. The flight leveled off at 25,000 feet, well above the highest terrain in their area of operations. At this altitude, they could observe a wide area while remaining outside the engagement envelope of most surface-to-air threats. The thin air at altitude required careful attention to aircraft performance, but it provided tactical advantages that outweighed the challenges. Viper flight, contact Mountaineer control on 254.65, came the handoff from departure control. Sarah switched frequencies and checked in with the airborne command and control aircraft that would coordinate their mission. Mountaineer was an E-3 AWACS aircraft orbiting at 30,000 feet, its powerful radar providing surveillance of the entire region. Viper flight, Mountaineer, radar contact. Proceed to assigned station and contact Outlaw 77 for ground coordination. The AWACS controller's voice was calm and professional, managing multiple aircraft across hundreds of square miles of airspace. Sarah acknowledged and switched to the frequency used by the forward air controller with the ground forces. Outlaw 77, Viper flight checking in with 4 F-16s, mixed ordnance, 2 hours playtime. The forward air controller, a young Air Force sergeant embedded with the Army unit, responded immediately. Viper flight, Outlaw 77, good to have you overhead. Ground units are beginning their advance into the target area now. Situation quiet at this time, but maintain station and be ready for immediate tasking. Sarah established a racetrack pattern over the valley, keeping her flight positioned to respond quickly to any requests for support. The ground forces appeared as tiny figures moving through the difficult terrain below, their progress slow but methodical as they searched suspected enemy positions. The peaceful morning scene was deceptive. Intelligence reports indicated significant enemy activity in the area, and Sarah knew that contact with hostile forces was likely. Her flight maintained constant vigilance, watching for any signs of trouble that might require immediate intervention. Captain Reynolds' voice came through the radio with professional calm. Lead 2. Movement in the northern ridgeline, approximately 2 o'clock from our current position. Sarah adjusted her aircraft sensors and spotted the activity Reynolds had identified. Small figures were moving among the rocks, but at their current distance, it was impossible to determine if they were friendly or hostile forces. Outlaw 77, Viper lead. We have movement on the northern ridge. Can you confirm friendly positions in that area? The forward air controller consulted with the ground commander before responding. Viper lead, negative friendly forces in that location. All ground units are accounted for in the valley floor. You are cleared to investigate, but hold fire until positive identification of hostile intent. The situation was developing exactly as Sarah had expected. Enemy forces were likely observing the ground advance and preparing to engage from concealed positions in the rocky terrain. The F-16s' presence overhead would deter some attacks, but determined enemy fighters might still attempt to ambush the ground forces. As Sarah maneuvered her flight for a closer look at the suspected enemy positions, she had no way of knowing that within the next hour, her routine close air support mission would escalate into one of the most intense combat situations of her career. The morning sun continued its relentless climb toward its zenith, and the temperature in the valley below was already becoming dangerous for the ground forces conducting their painstaking advance through enemy territory. The first indication of trouble came as a barely audible whisper through Sarah's headset. Static mixed with urgent voices as the forward air controller's transmission broke through the routine chatter of the mission frequency. What she heard next would transform their peaceful morning patrol into a desperate fight for survival. All stations, Outlaw 77. Troops in contact, troops in contact. Heavy small arms fire from multiple positions. Viper flight. We need immediate close air support on the northern ridgeline. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. Years of preparation and countless hours in simulators had prepared her for this moment. But the reality of combat always carried an electric intensity that no training could fully replicate. Her hands moved across the cockpit controls with practiced precision as she configured her aircraft for a combat attack. Viper flight lead. Weapons hot, descending to investigate. 2. Take high cover. 3 and 4, follow me down for initial assessment. Sarah pushed the nose of her F-16 downward, trading altitude for speed and a better view of the developing situation. The ground that had appeared so peaceful moments before now erupted with the deadly chaos of modern combat. Muzzle flashes winked like deadly stars from at least 6 different positions along the ridgeline. The enemy fighters had chosen their ambush site well, occupying elevated positions that provided excellent fields of fire into the valley where American ground forces were advancing. The steep terrain offered natural protection from direct assault, while rocky outcroppings provided cover from air attack. Captain Chin's voice came through the radio with characteristic precision. Lead 3. I count 8 to 10 fighting positions spread across approximately 500 meters of ridgeline. Targets appear to be using heavy machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades. Our guys are pinned down in that cluster of boulders about halfway up the valley floor. From her vantage point at 15,000 feet, Sarah could see the tactical situation developing below. The ground forces had been caught in a classic L-shaped ambush, with enemy fires converging from two directions to create an inescapable killing zone. Smoke was already rising from several locations where RPG rounds had impacted near the American positions. The forward air controller's voice carried new urgency as the situation deteriorated. Viper lead, Outlaw 77. We have casualties and need immediate suppression of enemy fires. Grid coordinates follow. November Delta 427, 689. Elevation 4,200 feet. Danger close. Friendly forces within 200 meters. Danger close. Those two words carried enormous significance in close air support operations. They meant that friendly forces were so near the target that any weapons employment carried the risk of friendly fire casualties. Sarah would have to place her ordnance with surgical precision while under potential enemy fire herself. Outlaw 77. Viper lead copies grid November Delta 427, 689. Confirm friendlies 200 meters south of target area. I need you to mark your position with smoke. Purple smoke billowed from the American position as the ground forces deployed their marking devices. The colored smoke provided a clear visual reference that allowed Sarah to orient her attack while maintaining safe separation from friendly troops. Every detail mattered when lives hung in the balance. Captain Rodriguez checked in from his position above the fight. Lead 4. I've got eyes on additional movement about 1,000 meters east of the primary engagement area. Looks like enemy reinforcements moving toward the fight. Count approximately 15 personnel with crew-served weapons. The situation was escalating beyond a simple ambush. Enemy forces were attempting to surround the American ground unit, cutting off escape routes and bringing additional firepower to bear. Sarah realized that her flight would need to engage multiple target areas simultaneously to break the developing encirclement. Roger 4. Maintain observation on the eastern group. I'll take the primary ridgeline targets first. Then, we'll shift to prevent that flanking movement. Sarah armed her weapons systems and began her attack run on the most dangerous enemy positions. The F-16 descended through 12,000 feet as Sarah lined up her first target. The heads-up display showed target designation information while her targeting pod provided detailed imagery of the enemy position. She could see individual fighters moving among the rocks, their weapons flashing as they continued to pour fire onto the trapped American forces. Viper lead is in from the north, attacking machine gun position at grid 427, 692. 30 seconds. Standard procedure required her to announce her attack direction and timing to prevent friendly forces from engaging her aircraft by mistake. Confusion in combat had led to tragic friendly fire incidents throughout military history. The targeting solution appeared solid on her displays as Sarah refined her aim point. The 500-pound GPS-guided bomb would provide sufficient explosive power to neutralize the enemy position while minimizing the risk to nearby friendly forces. Her finger found the pickle button as the range to target decreased through optimal release parameters. Rifle. The code word indicated weapons release as the bomb separated from her aircraft and began its guided flight toward the target. Sarah immediately pulled into a climbing turn to avoid potential surface-to-air fire while maintaining visual contact with the target area. 23 seconds later, the explosion erupted against the ridgeline with devastating effect. Rock and debris flew outward from the impact point as the enemy machine gun position disappeared in a cloud of dust and smoke. The distinctive sound of heavy automatic weapons fire from that location ceased immediately. Good hit, good hit. The forward air controller's voice carried relief and excitement. Primary machine gun position destroyed. Enemy fires significantly reduced, but we still have multiple targets engaging from the eastern positions. Captain Reynolds was already positioning for his attack run as Sarah climbed back to altitude. His target was a cluster of fighting positions that continued to rake the American ground forces with small arms fire and RPG rounds. The precision required for these attacks demanded absolute concentration and flawless execution. Two's in from the west, Attacking personnel in the open at grid 426-687. Guns. Reynolds had selected his 20mm cannon for this target, using the aircraft's internal gun system to engage enemy fighters who were moving between covered positions. The F-16's cannon fired in controlled bursts as Reynolds walked his rounds across the target area. The high-explosive incendiary ammunition created a series of small explosions among the enemy positions, forcing the fighters to take cover and disrupting their coordinated attack on the American ground forces. But even as they successfully engaged the primary ambush positions, the tactical situation continued to evolve in dangerous directions. Captain Chen's voice carried new concern as she reported on the Eastern Group that Rodriguez was monitoring. Lead 3. The Eastern Group is definitely moving to flank our ground forces. They've got at least 2 heavy machine guns and what looks like a recoilless rifle. If they get into position on that eastern ridge, they'll have a clear shot at our guys with no cover. Sarah processed the information while planning her next attack. The enemy was demonstrating sophisticated tactics, using the primary ambush to fix the American forces in place while a secondary force maneuvered to deliver a killing blow. Breaking this coordinated attack would require precise timing and aggressive action. 4. Lead. What's your current position on that Eastern Group? Sarah needed current information to coordinate an effective response. Lead 4. Eastern Group is approximately 700 meters from effective firing positions. They're moving fast, using covered approaches. I estimate we have maybe 5 minutes before they're in position to engage. 5 minutes. In combat, 5 minutes could feel like an eternity or pass in an instant. Sarah knew that her flight would have to act quickly to prevent the enemy flanking movement from succeeding. The lives of the ground forces depended on their ability to break the enemy attack before the tactical situation became hopeless. Outlaw 77, Viper Lead. We need to engage the Eastern Group immediately. Can you clear us for attacks in that area? Viper Lead. Be advised we have a patrol that was supposed to be in that area, but they haven't reported in for 20 minutes. Consider the area hostile. You are cleared hot. The missing patrol added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous situation. They might be casualties of the enemy ambush, or they could be trapped somewhere in the target area. Sarah would have to proceed with the assumption that anyone in the eastern sector was hostile while remaining alert for any signs of American forces. Captain Rodriguez had already begun his attack run on the flanking force. His aircraft dove toward the target area while his targeting systems locked onto the leading elements of the enemy column. The precision-guided munition he selected would create a barrier of destruction that would halt the enemy advance. 4's in from the south, attacking personnel and equipment at grid 425-701. 30 seconds. Rodriguez's calm professionalism was evident in his radio call despite the intensity of the situation developing below. But as Rodriguez lined up his attack, new threats emerged from unexpected directions. The distinctive trail of a surface-to-air missile rose from a concealed position, its deadly trajectory aimed directly at his aircraft. The enemy had been waiting for the F-16s to commit to low-altitude attacks before revealing their air defense capabilities. Missile launch, missile launch. 4, break right now. Sarah's urgent warning crackled through the radio as she watched the SAM climb toward Rodriguez's aircraft. The young pilot's reaction was immediate and decisive, throwing his F-16 into a violent evasive maneuver while deploying defensive countermeasures. Chaff and flares streamed from Rodriguez's aircraft as he pulled into a crushing 7G turn that pushed the F-16 to the limits of its performance envelope. The surface-to-air missile, confused by the defensive measures and the radical change in its target's flight path, detonated harmlessly several hundred feet away. 4's clean, continuing attack. Rodriguez's voice betrayed no emotion as he recovered from his evasive maneuvers and reacquired his target. His weapon release was perfectly timed despite the distraction of the missile threat, and his GPS-guided bomb impacted directly among the enemy flanking force. The explosion sent shock waves through the rocky terrain as enemy fighters scattered from the impact area. Several were caught in the open and eliminated immediately, while others sought cover among the boulders and vegetation. The coordinated enemy advance ground to a halt as survivors tried to regroup under continuing air attack. But the surface-to-air missile launch had revealed a new and deadly dimension to the enemy's capabilities. Intelligence had indicated minimal air defense threats in the area, yet the enemy had successfully concealed at least one SAM system capable of engaging low-flying aircraft. Sarah realized that her flight was now operating in a much more dangerous environment than originally briefed. All Vipers, be advised we have confirmed SAM threat in the area. Maintain altitude above 15,000 feet, and be ready for evasive action. Sarah's warning came just in time as additional missile launches erupted from various positions around the valley. The enemy had revealed a sophisticated air defense network that had been carefully concealed until the F-16s committed to their attacks. Multiple missile systems engaged simultaneously, creating a deadly web of intersecting threats that forced all four aircraft into evasive maneuvers. Captain Chen found herself bracketed by two missiles as she attempted to attack a machine gun position that was still firing on the ground forces. Her F-16 twisted through the sky in a series of barrel rolls and split-S maneuvers that tested both aircraft and pilot to their limits. Defensive flares created a constellation of false targets as she fought to survive the coordinated missile engagement. Threes defending multiple missiles. Chen's transmission was punctuated by the strain in her voice as she pulled nearly 8 GS in a desperate attempt to defeat the incoming threats. Her aircraft's radar warning receiver screamed continuous warnings as multiple guidance systems attempted to lock onto her F-16. Sarah watched helplessly as her wingmen fought for survival against overwhelming odds. The tactical situation had deteriorated from a routine close air support mission to a complex air-to-air engagement that her flight was not properly equipped to handle. She realized that they would need immediate assistance if they were going to survive the next few minutes. The missile engagement reached its crescendo as Captain Chen's F-16 disappeared into a cloud of chaff and flares, her aircraft's defensive systems working overtime to defeat the multiple surface-to-air threats converging on her position. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched her wingmen's desperate evasive maneuvers, knowing that one mistake or system failure could result in the loss of both aircraft and pilot. 3. Status report. Sarah called urgently as Chen's aircraft emerged from the electronic fog, still intact but visibly shaken by the close encounter. Lead 3. I'm clean, but that was way too close. These guys have more than just shoulder-fired missiles down there. I'm seeing radar-guided systems that weren't in the intelligence brief. Chen's voice carried the strain of her recent ordeal, but her professionalism remained intact despite the shock of nearly being shot down. The tactical situation had evolved far beyond what any of them had expected when they launched from Bugram that morning. What had appeared to be a routine close air support mission for ground forces conducting clearing operations had revealed itself as a carefully orchestrated trap designed to lure American aircraft into a sophisticated air defense engagement zone. Sarah keyed her radio to contact the Airborne Command and Control aircraft that was coordinating air operations throughout the region. Mountaineer Control, Viper Lead. We have encountered heavy surface-to-air missile threats in our assigned area. Multiple radar-guided systems, effectiveness unknown. Request immediate assistance and threat assessment. The response from the AWACS aircraft came quickly, confirming Sarah's worst fears about the developing situation. Viper Lead, Mountaineer. We're tracking your engagement and have identified at least 4 distinct radar signatures in your area. Intelligence is working to classify the threat systems, but preliminary assessment indicates SA-6 or SA-8 class missiles with supporting short-range systems. SA-6 and SA-8 missile systems represented serious threats to any aircraft operating at medium altitudes. These were not the primitive, shoulder-fired weapons that coalition forces had become accustomed to encountering in Afghanistan. Someone had transported and concealed sophisticated air defense systems in the remote valley, creating a deadly surprise for any aircraft that ventured into their engagement envelope. Mountaineer, Viper Lead. Ground forces are still taking heavy fire and need immediate support. We're going to need additional assets to suppress these air defense systems before we can effectively engage the ground targets. Sarah's request reflected the harsh reality of the situation they faced. Captain Reynolds checked in from his position high above the valley, his aircraft serving as overwatch while the others dealt with the immediate missile threats. Lead 2. I can see at least 3 mobile launchers that have moved since the initial engagement. These guys are using shoot and scoot tactics, firing missiles, and then relocating to avoid counterstrike. The enemy's tactical sophistication continued to surprise and concern Sarah. Mobile air defense systems were extremely difficult to locate and destroy, especially when operated by experienced crews who understood the importance of movement and concealment. Each launcher could engage multiple targets before moving to a new firing position, creating a persistent threat that would plague any aircraft operating in the area. The forward air controller's voice broke through the tactical discussions with renewed urgency. Viper lead, Outlaw 77. Ground situation is deteriorating rapidly. We have multiple wounded and are running low on ammunition. Enemy forces are advancing on our position from 3 directions. We need immediate close air support or we're going to be overrun. Sarah found herself facing an impossible tactical dilemma. The ground forces desperately needed air support to survive, but her F-16s could not effectively engage ground targets while under constant threat from sophisticated surface-to-air missiles. Traditional fighter aircraft were not equipped to handle the complex suppression of enemy air defenses mission that the situation now required. Outlaw 77, Viper lead. Understand your situation. We're working on getting additional assets to suppress the air defense systems, but it's going to take time. Can you break contact and move to a more defensible position? Negative, Viper lead. We have wounded who can't be moved, and the enemy has us surrounded. We need fires on these positions within the next 10 minutes, or we won't be here when the cavalry arrives. 10 minutes. Sarah calculated quickly, considering the various assets that might be available to assist her flight. Traditional SE-80 aircraft were located at bases hundreds of miles away, making them unavailable for immediate assistance. Electronic warfare aircraft might be able to jam some of the enemy radars, but they were also operating from distant locations and would require time to reach the target area. Mountaineer control, Viper lead. What additional assets do you have available for immediate tasking to our location? We need something that can operate effectively in a high-threat air defense environment. The AWACS controller paused for several moments, consulting with various command elements to determine what resources might be available. When he finally responded, his words carried a note of hope that had been absent from previous communications. Viper lead, Mountaineer. We have Hog Flight operating approximately 40 nautical miles south of your position. 2 A-10s with mixed ordnance, including AGM-65 Maverick missiles. They can be on station in approximately 15 minutes. A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft, affectionately known as Warthogs, were specifically designed for close air support operations in hostile environments. Their heavily armored construction and powerful 30mm cannon made them ideal for engaging ground targets while absorbing enemy fire that would destroy other aircraft. Most importantly, their Maverick missiles could engage targets from beyond the range of most surface-to-air missile systems. Mountaineer, Viper lead. Request immediate tasking of Hog Flight to our location. We'll maintain high cover and provide target designation support. Sarah felt a surge of relief knowing that help was on the way, but 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours given the desperate situation of the ground forces below. Captain Rodriguez had been monitoring enemy communications frequencies and reported new intelligence that added urgency to the developing situation. Lead 4. I'm picking up enemy radio traffic indicating they're preparing for a final assault on our ground forces. Sounds like they're massing personnel for a coordinated attack from multiple directions. The enemy commander was demonstrating tactical competence by recognizing that his window of opportunity was closing. Once additional American air assets arrived on station, his surface-to-air missiles would face overwhelming opposition from aircraft specifically designed to defeat air defense systems. His only chance for success lay in overwhelming the ground forces before effective air support could be established. Sarah made a difficult decision based on the tactical realities they faced. All Vipers, we're going to provide what support we can while staying above 15,000 feet. Use your targeting pods to designate targets for when Hog Flight arrives. If anyone gets a clear shot at a SAM site, take it, but don't compromise your aircraft trying to engage ground targets. The next 12 minutes passed with agonizing slowness as Sarah's flight maintained their high-altitude orbit while the ground battle raged below. Enemy forces launched several more missiles at the F-16s, but the increased altitude and aggressive maneuvering kept all four aircraft safe, while denying them the ability to provide effective close air support. The forward air controller's updates painted an increasingly desperate picture as the enemy assault developed. Viper lead, Outlaw 77. Enemy forces are within 100 meters of our position on the eastern approach. We're taking heavy casualties and running critically low on ammunition. How much longer until additional support arrives? Outlaw 77, approximately 5 minutes. Hang in there. Help is coming. Sarah's words sounded hollow even to herself as she watched enemy fighters move closer to the American positions. Smoke and dust obscured much of the battlefield, but muzzle flashes and explosions continued to mark the locations where desperate men fought for survival. The sound of different engines finally reached the valley as two A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft approached from the south. Unlike the sleek lines of the F-16s, the Warthogs appeared crude and utilitarian, but their ungainly appearance concealed capabilities that made them the most feared close air support aircraft in the world. Viper lead, Hog lead checking in with two A-10s, full-load Mavericks, and 30 Mike. Ready to party. The A-10 flight leader's casual tone contrasted sharply with the tension that had characterized communications during the missile engagements. These pilots were accustomed to operating in the most dangerous environments where survival depended on armor, firepower, and aggressive tactics. Major Sandra Williams had been flying A-10s for 8 years and had accumulated over 600 combat hours in various theaters of operation. Her wingman, Captain Derek Thompson, was newer to combat operations but had already proven himself in several previous engagements. Both pilots understood that they were entering a complex tactical situation that would test their skills and their aircraft to the maximum. Hog lead, Viper lead. Situation is multiple SAM sites with supporting ground forces engaging friendly troops. Friendlies are marked with purple smoke in the valley floor. Priority targets are air defense systems, then ground forces threatening friendly positions. Viper lead, Hog lead copies. We'll take the SAM sites first to clear the airspace, then work on the ground targets. Thanks for keeping the Badgers off us while we set up. Major Williams' reference to SAM sites as Badgers reflected the dark humor that combat pilots use to cope with the deadly realities of their profession. The A-10s descended toward the target area with the confidence that came from flying aircraft designed to absorb punishment while delivering devastating firepower. Their titanium armor could withstand direct hits from automatic weapons and small-caliber anti-aircraft guns, while their redundant systems allowed them to continue operating even after suffering significant battle damage. Captain Thompson was the first to spot a surface-to-air missile launcher that had revealed its position by firing at the F-16s during their earlier engagement. Lead 2. I have eyes on a SAM site at my 2 o'clock, approximately 3,000 meters from the friendly position. Mobile launcher with associated radar vehicle. Roger 2, I see it. Let's take them with Mavericks for maximum range. Major Williams armed her AGM-65 Maverick missiles and began the target designation process that would guide the precision weapons to their targets. The Maverick missile was specifically designed to engage armored targets at long range, using an infrared seeker head that could distinguish between different types of vehicles and equipment. Its substantial warhead was capable of destroying even heavily protected targets with a single hit. Hog lead rifle. The missile separated from Williams' aircraft and began its journey toward the enemy air defense site. The AGM-65 seeker head locked onto the heat signature of the enemy radar vehicle and adjusted its trajectory for optimal impact. 18 seconds later, the missile struck its target with devastating effect. The explosion not only destroyed the radar vehicle, but also set off a secondary explosion as the missile's warhead detonated the radar system's electronic components. The SAM site was eliminated as an effective air defense threat within moments of the A-10's arrival. The destruction of the first SAM site marked the beginning of a systematic dismantling of the enemy's sophisticated air defense network. Major Williams and Captain Thompson worked with clinical precision, using their Maverick missiles to engage targets from beyond the range of most surface-to-air threats, while Sarah's F-16s provided high-altitude overwatch and target designation support. Hog 2 rifle. Thompson's second Maverick streaked toward another mobile launcher that had been repositioning to avoid detection. The enemy crew had made the mistake of moving across open ground where the A-10's targeting systems could easily track their heat signature. The missile impact silenced another air defense system permanently. With two of the primary SAM sites eliminated, the tactical balance began to shift in favor of the American forces. The remaining enemy air defense operators found themselves under constant threat of precision missile attack, forcing them to remain concealed and limiting their ability to engage the coalition aircraft effectively. Captain Reynolds monitored the enemy radio frequencies and reported encouraging intelligence about the degradation of their air defense capabilities. All aircraft, too. Enemy communications indicate they've lost contact with at least 3 air defense units. Sounds like their coordination is breaking down. The psychological effect of losing sophisticated equipment to precise air attacks was often as devastating as the physical damage itself. Enemy commanders who had felt confident in their ability to deny American aircraft access to the battlefield now faced the prospect of operating without effective air defense coverage. Major Williams pressed her advantage by shifting focus to the ground targets that continued to threaten the surrounded American forces. Hog Lead is switching to guns, engaging personnel in the open on the eastern ridgeline. Friendlies remain clear of target area. The A-10's Gu-8 30mm cannon was perhaps the most feared anti-personnel weapon in the American arsenal. Capable of firing 3,900 rounds per minute, the 7-barrel rotary cannon could deliver devastating firepower with surgical precision. Each round was the size of a small bottle and contained enough explosive power to disable armored vehicles or eliminate personnel in fortified positions. The distinctive sound of the Gu-8 firing echoed through the valley as Williams walked her cannon rounds across the enemy positions. The high-explosive incendiary ammunition created a line of destruction along the ridgeline where enemy fighters had been directing fire onto the American ground forces below. Outlaw 77, Hog Lead. How does that look on the eastern positions? Williams requested battle damage assessment from the forward air controller, who had the best view of the target area. Hog Lead, outstanding. Enemy fires from the eastern positions have ceased completely. You guys just saved our lives. The relief in the controller's voice was evident as the immediate pressure on the ground forces was reduced significantly. But even as one threat was eliminated, others continued to develop around the battlefield. Captain Chin spotted new enemy movement that indicated the fight was far from over. All aircraft, 3. Large group of personnel moving down the western slope, approximately 2,000 meters from friendly positions. Count at least 20 individuals with crew-served weapons. The enemy commander was attempting to reinforce his failing attack by committing reserve forces that had been held in concealment. These fresh troops represented a significant threat to the weakened American ground forces, especially if they could establish firing positions before being detected and engaged by air support. Captain Thompson maneuvered his A-10 to engage the new threat, while Major Williams continued to suppress enemy positions along the primary ridgeline. The Warthog's ability to operate at low altitude and slow airspeed made it ideal for tracking and engaging moving targets in mountainous terrain. Hog 2 in from the west, engaging personnel moving in the open. Guns. Thompson's attack run took him directly over the enemy formation as they attempted to cross a section of exposed ground between rocky outcroppings. The 30mm cannon rounds impacted among the enemy fighters with devastating effect. Several were eliminated immediately, while others sought cover among the boulders and vegetation that dotted the steep hillside. The coordinated advance ground to a halt as the survivors tried to assess their losses and reorganize under continuing air attack. Sarah coordinated with the A-10 pilots to ensure that all enemy forces in the area were located and engaged before they could threaten the ground forces. Her F-16s remained at high altitude where they could maintain surveillance of the entire battlefield while staying clear of small arms fire from enemy positions. Hog Flight, Viper Lead. We're tracking additional movement about 3,000 meters north of your current engagement area. Appears to be vehicles and personnel moving toward the valley. Could be reinforcements or an escape route. Major Williams acknowledged the report and began planning her approach to the new target area. The A-10's sophisticated targeting systems allowed her to identify and classify different types of vehicles and equipment from considerable distances, providing crucial intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. Viper lead, Hog lead. I see what you're talking about. Looks like 2 technical vehicles and approximately 15 personnel. They're moving toward a position where they could interdict any extraction of the ground forces. I'm going to nail them with Mavericks before they get into position. Technical vehicles, typically pickup trucks or similar civilian vehicles modified to carry heavy weapons, were common in insurgent operations. Their mobility and firepower made them dangerous opponents, especially in terrain where conventional military vehicles had difficulty operating effectively. The Maverick missile's infrared seeker had easily distinguished between the engine heat signatures of the technical vehicles and the cooler background temperature of the surrounding terrain. Williams selected her targets carefully to ensure that both vehicles would be eliminated in the coordinated attack. Hog lead, rifle. 2 missiles separated from her aircraft in quick succession, their trajectories converging on the enemy vehicles that were still moving toward their intended firing positions. The timing of the attack was crucial to prevent the enemy from establishing effective positions overlooking the American ground forces. Both missiles found their targets within seconds of each other, creating a devastating double explosion that eliminated the technical vehicles and scattered their supporting personnel. Secondary explosions from ammunition and fuel carried on the vehicles extended the destruction beyond the immediate impact area. The elimination of the mobile threat allowed the forward air controller to begin planning for extraction of the wounded ground forces. All aircraft, Outlaw 77. Enemy pressure has been significantly reduced. We're going to attempt movement to a better defensive position while we wait for helicopter extraction of our casualties. Captain Rodriguez maintained overwatch as the ground forces began their careful movement across the dangerous terrain. His targeting pod provided detailed surveillance that allowed him to spot any enemy forces that might attempt to interfere with the withdrawal. All stations, 4. I have eyes on the ground movement. Route appears clear of enemy forces, but I'm tracking what might be an observation post about 1,500 meters to the northeast. Single structure with possible personnel. The potential observation post represented a threat to the ground forces movement and to any helicopter that might attempt to extract casualties from the area. Enemy observers could direct mortar or artillery fire onto exposed forces or report aircraft movements to surviving air defense systems. Captain Thompson was positioned to investigate the suspected enemy position while Major Williams continued to suppress any remaining threats in the immediate area. The A-10's ability to operate at low altitude allowed for detailed visual reconnaissance that was impossible from the higher altitudes required by the F-16s. Hog 2 descending for visual reconnaissance of suspected observation post. If I confirm enemy presence, I'll engage with guns. Thompson's A-10 dropped toward the target area while his pilot scanned the structure for any signs of enemy activity. As Thompson approached the suspected position, muzzle flashes erupted from the building, confirming the presence of enemy forces and their hostile intent. The observation post was occupied by at least 3 fighters armed with automatic weapons and radio equipment that could coordinate attacks on the American forces. Hog 2 confirmed enemy position. Multiple personnel with weapons and communications equipment, engaging with 30 Mike. Thompson lined up his attack run to ensure that his cannon fire would eliminate the threat without causing excessive collateral damage to the surrounding area. The GAU-8 cannon's precision allowed Thompson to place his rounds exactly where they would be most effective. The building collapsed under the impact of multiple 30mm rounds, eliminating the enemy observation post and ensuring that the ground forces could move without being tracked by enemy spotters. With the major threats neutralized, the battlefield began to quiet as surviving enemy forces either withdrew or remained hidden in positions where they could not effectively engage coalition forces. The coordinated enemy attack had been broken by the combined efforts of the F-16s and A-10s, but at considerable cost to the forces involved. Outlaw 77, Viper lead. What's your status on casualties and ammunition? Sarah needed to understand the ground situation before additional enemy forces could arrive to renew the attack. Viper lead. We have 4 wounded, 2 serious. Ammunition is critically low across all weapon systems. We can defend our current position for maybe another 30 minutes before we're ineffective. The forward air controller's assessment highlighted the urgency of extracting the ground forces before the tactical situation deteriorated again. Major Williams coordinated with the Rescue Coordination Center to expedite helicopter extraction of the wounded while maintaining air cover over the landing zone. Rescue Control, Hog Lead. We have secure landing zone for immediate casualty evacuation. Area is clear of enemy threats, but we recommend maintaining escort aircraft during extraction. The next hour passed in relative calm as medical evacuation helicopters arrived to transport the wounded to advanced medical facilities. The A-10s and F-16s maintained constant patrols over the area to ensure that enemy forces could not interfere with the humanitarian mission. As the last helicopter departed with the casualties, Sarah realized that what had begun as a routine close air support mission had evolved into one of the most challenging combat situations of her career. The enemy's sophisticated tactics and unexpected capabilities had tested every aspect of her training and experience. Hog Lead, Viper Lead. Outstanding work today. Your arrival made all the difference in the outcome. Sarah's gratitude was genuine as she recognized that the A-10s had provided capabilities that her F-16s simply could not match in the complex threat environment they had encountered. Viper Lead, Hog Lead. That's what we're here for. Those ground guys earned every bit of support we could give them. Major Williams' response reflected the mutual respect that existed between different aircraft communities when they worked together effectively in combat. The flight back to Bagram provided time for reflection on the lessons learned during the intense engagement. Sarah realized that intelligence about enemy capabilities had been incomplete, leading to tactical surprises that could have resulted in the loss of aircraft and lives. Future missions would require more comprehensive threat assessment and planning for complex air defense environments. The debrief that followed would analyze every aspect of the mission, from initial intelligence preparation to final target engagement. Lessons learned would be incorporated into training programs and tactical procedures to ensure that other aircrews would be better prepared for similar situations. As she shut down her aircraft on the Bagram flight line, Sarah felt the satisfaction that came from a mission accomplished despite overwhelming challenges. The coordinated efforts of multiple aircraft types had prevented a tactical disaster and saved the lives of American ground forces who had found themselves in an impossible situation. The setting sun painted the Afghan mountains in shades of orange and purple as Sarah completed her post-flight inspection. Tomorrow would bring new missions and new challenges, but today had proven once again that American air power, when properly coordinated and applied, could overcome even the most sophisticated enemy tactics and achieve victory in the most difficult circumstances.